The market was loud, filled with voices, strange lights, and the smell of food that no human would ever recognize. The sky above the alien city glowed with 2 moons, and ships moved slowly in the air like giant birds. In the middle of all this, one man walked carefully, a human, the only human in this place. His clothes were simple, his face tired, but his eyes kept moving, watching every corner. Because he knew he was not welcome, aliens of different shapes passed by him. Some tall with glowing skin, some short with wide eyes, some with wings folded against their backs. They looked at him with cold eyes, whispering to each other, their voices sharp. To them, he was nothing more than a stranger, maybe even a danger, but the man did not turn back. He kept walking, keeping his head low, trying to blend into a world that was not his. He had been on this planet for weeks, working for food, sleeping in broken shelters. He had learned quickly that humans were not liked here. Stories said humans were weak, selfish, and always looking for trouble. He did not argue with them. He did not fight back. He just survived quietly. But then, in the middle of the market, he saw something. A young alien girl, smaller than the others, stood near a stall. Her skin shimmered faintly, and her eyes were like liquid silver. But the crowd around her did not treat her with respect. They pushed her, they mocked her, calling her names he could not understand. One of them even grabbed her arm and laughed. The girl tried to pull away, her face full of fear. The human stopped, his hands tightening into fists. He knew the rule: do not interfere, stay quiet, survive. But something inside him refused to move on. He remembered the long days he had been insulted, the nights he had been left hungry. He remembered the silence of everyone around him when he needed help. And now he saw the same silence falling on this girl. Nobody helped her, nobody cared. They only watched like it was entertainment. The man stepped forward, his voice calm but strong. "Leave her alone," he said. The aliens turned, their eyes narrowing. One of them laughed, a cruel, deep sound. "And what will you do, human?" The alien spat. The crowd grew louder. Excited, hungry for conflict. The girl's eyes widened, shocked that anyone would stand for her. But the human did not step back, he moved closer. Standing between the girl and the bullies, for a moment silence. Then the first alien shoved him hard. He staggered but did not fall. Another hit him across the face. His lips split and blood ran down his chin. The crowd laughed, their voices echoing through the market. The human wiped the blood with the back of his hand. His body hurt, but his eyes stayed steady. I said, "Leave her alone," he repeated, his voice shaking but firm. The aliens did not like this. They punched him again, harder this time, knocking him down. The girl cried out, but nobody listened. The human pulled himself up, his knees weak, his chest burning. Still he stood, still he faced them. He knew he could not win, but winning was not the point. The point was to stand, even when no one else would. The crowd watched in silence now. Some of them whispered, surprised at his stubbornness. Why was a human, a weak human, willing to take pain for someone not his kind? The girl looked at him with trembling eyes. She had never seen anyone fight for her, not even her own people. Her heart beat fast. Torn between fear and hope, the aliens grew angry. "Enough," one of them growled. Lifting a heavy fist, ready to finish him, the human braced himself, blood dripping from his face, his body shaking. But before the final blow landed, a voice cut through the crowd. It was sharp, commanding. The bullies froze, the crowd turned, and the girl gasped, her silver eyes wide with shock. The human turned too, his vision blurred through the haze. He saw tall figures pushing through the crowd. Warriors, their armor marked with strange glowing lines, their faces hard and merciless. The girl's lips parted as she whispered one word, "Brothers." The human's heart sank. He did not know if they had come to save her or to kill him, but in that moment, he understood one thing: his life was now tied to hers, and whatever came next would decide if he lived or if his story ended here. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the storm that was about to fall, and the human stood, broken but unyielding, a stranger among aliens, yet no longer invisible. The market was silent, every eye watching the tall warriors who had just arrived. Their armor shone under the light of 2 moons, sharp lines glowing like fire across their chest plates. They moved with the weight of power, the kind of strength that made crowds step back without question. And at the sight of them, the girl whispered again, her voice trembling, "Brothers." The human felt the air grow heavy, his body still aching from the blows, his lips bleeding. He knew these were not ordinary men. They were her protectors, her blood, her family. But family could be more dangerous than enemies if they believed the whispers of the crowd. If they believed he had shamed their sister, his fate was already sealed. One of the warriors stepped closer, his eyes glowing faintly, his voice sharp. "Who touched her?" he demanded, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. The bullies who had mocked the girl lowered their eyes, pointing their fingers quickly at the human. "He interfered," one said. "He dared to stand against us," the crowd murmured, voices twisting the story, some saying he insulted her, others saying he grabbed her. Lies spread faster than truth, and the human could feel the net tightening around him. The girl's lips parted, but no words came. Fear locked her throat, because she knew her brother's tempers. They would strike before asking questions. They would destroy before listening. She looked at the human, who still stood tall despite his broken body. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but his eyes never left hers. There was no fear in them, only a strange calm, a silent promise telling her without words that he had chosen to protect her. Even if it cost him everything, the brothers drew closer, and the bullies stepped back, their faces smug. They believed the human would be crushed in seconds, erased from this place like dust. The girl's heart pounded, her hands shaking. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell them it was the human who saved her, but her voice would not come, drowned by the weight of fear and shame. The warriors did not attack right away. They only glared at him. Their faces unreadable, one of them spoke, his tone colder than space itself. "You are human," he said, "and you dared to stand before us." The crowd hissed with excitement. Waiting for the first strike, the human stayed silent, his fists still clenched, his breath steady. He did not explain. He did not beg, because he knew begging never earned respect. Finally, one of the brothers barked a command. "Take him." Rough hands grabbed his arms, dragging him through the streets. The girl watched helplessly as the human disappeared into the shadows of the city. Her heart sank, guilt crushing her chest. He had suffered for her, and she had done nothing to stop it. Later that night, when the city grew quiet and the crowd dispersed, the girl slipped away. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the darkness as she moved through narrow alleys. She knew where they had taken him. She knew her brothers would not kill him right away. First, they would question. Then they would punish. Her steps quickened, the cold air biting at her skin. She had to reach him before it was too late. In a forgotten chamber under the warrior's hall, the human sat chained. His body was bruised, his breathing rough still, his eyes remained sharp, unbroken. He had seen enough cruelty in his life to know pain was not the worst fate. The worst fate was silence, the kind that let evil win. So even as blood dried on his face, he whispered to himself, "I did the right thing." The door creaked open and the girl stepped inside. Her hands trembled as she held a small bowl of glowing water. She moved quickly, kneeling beside him. "You should not be here," the human said softly. His voice cracked, but she ignored his warning, lifting the bowl to his lips. "Drink," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please drink." He hesitated, then obeyed, the cool liquid easing the fire in his throat. For a long moment, they said nothing, only the sound of water dripping from the ceiling. Finally, the girl spoke, her voice filled with guilt. "They think you shamed me. They will not listen." The human met her eyes, shaking his head slowly. "I did not protect you for their approval," he said. "I did it because it was right." Her eyes widened, shimmering with tears. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her as worth suffering for. The girl placed her hand on his arm, her fingers trembling. "I will speak," she whispered. "I will tell the truth." But fear crept back into her heart, because she knew what it meant. If she spoke, she would challenge her brother's pride, and they were warriors who bowed to no one. Yet when she looked at him, broken but unyielding, she felt a strange strength rise inside her. A silent promise passed between them, unspoken but clear. She would not let him suffer alone. Outside the chamber, heavy footsteps echoed. The brothers were coming, their voices low and dangerous. The girl pulled her hand away quickly, hiding the bowl, her silver eyes flashing with fear. The human straightened his back, chains clinking against the stone. Whatever came next, he would face it with the same calm as before, and this time he was no longer alone. The door opened, shadows filling the room. The brothers entered, their eyes sharp, their presence suffocating. The girl stood frozen, her heart racing. The human lifted his chin, blood on his lips but fire in his eyes. The storm was about to break, and none of them knew who would survive it. The chamber grew colder as the brothers stepped inside, their heavy boots echoing on the stone floor. The human felt the weight of their presence like iron pressing against his chest. They were taller than most of the aliens he had seen, their armor sharp with glowing marks that pulsed like fire. Their eyes glowed faintly, filled with suspicion, filled with anger, and in those eyes, the human saw no mercy. The girl lowered her head. Unable to meet their gaze, her hands trembled at her sides, her silver eyes hidden in shadow. The tallest of the brothers stopped in front of the chained human, his face stern and unreadable. He looked down at him as if looking at something small, something weak, something unworthy. "You are human," the warrior said, his voice deep and sharp like steel. "And you dared to put yourself in front of her." The human did not bow his head. Blood still stained his lip, but his eyes held steady. He knew that silence was stronger than begging, and though his body was broken, his spirit refused to bend. The brothers studied him, their expressions dark. The crowd's lies still hung heavy in their minds. Whispers of insult, whispers of dishonor. If they believed those lies, the human's life would be taken here. In this chamber, one of the brothers stepped forward, his voice harsher than the others. "Why did you touch her?" he demanded, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. The human's breath was rough, but his words were calm. "I touched no one," he said. "I stood because others would not." The brothers exchanged a glance, their faces tightening. To them, words were nothing, only strength mattered, and the human, to their eyes, looked too fragile to carry strength. The girl's lips parted, her heart pounding. She wanted to shout the truth, to tell them he was innocent, but fear held her back. She had seen her brother's fury before, their judgment swift and merciless. If she spoke too soon, they might strike her as well, so she remained silent, torn between fear and the silent promise she had seen in the human's eyes. The tallest brother gave a sharp gesture. "Take him to the hall," he ordered. The guards pulled the human roughly, chains dragging on the floor. The girl's stomach twisted as she watched him forced out of the chamber. The brothers followed, their steps slow, deliberate, carrying the weight of law and pride. The hall of judgment was vast, filled with fire torches that burned blue. Crowds gathered again, eager for blood, eager for drama. They whispered among themselves, their voices low but sharp. Some spoke of shame, some spoke of punishment, all hungry for the human's end. The human was forced to his knees in the center, chains biting into his wrists. The girl stood to the side, her body tense, her heart screaming with guilt. The eldest brother raised his voice, echoing across the stone walls. "This human stands accused of dishonoring our sister," he declared. Gasps filled the hall, the crowd roared. They did not want truth, they wanted a spectacle. The human closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of their hatred. But when he opened them again, they were steady, calm, unshaken. One of the bullies from the market stepped forward. He bowed his head with false respect, his words dripping with lies. He touched her, he mocked her. He claimed she belonged to him, the alien said. The crowd gasped again, anger burning hotter. The human did not shout, did not argue. He only clenched his fists, blood trickling down from the chains. He knew words alone could not clear him. The brothers turned to the girl, their eyes sharp. "Speak," one of them commanded. "Is it true?" Her throat tightened, her breath shallow. This was the moment, the line between life and death. If she stayed silent, her brothers would kill the human. If she spoke, she would stand against their pride. Against their rage, her silver eyes flicked to the human, who met her gaze without fear in his eyes. She saw no begging, only trust. He believed she would tell the truth, even if it cost him everything, but her voice would not rise. The hall waited, the crowd leaned forward. The brother's anger grew, and the human remained silent. Even as chains cut into his skin, even as death closed in, he had chosen his path, and he would not betray it with fear. The eldest brother lowered his hand, his voice final. "Then the human dies," he declared. The hall erupted with cheers. The crowd howled with excitement, but in that chaos, the girl felt something break inside her. Her heart screamed louder than her fear. She could no longer stay silent. Her voice cut through the hall, trembling but strong. "No," she cried. "It is not true." The hall froze. Every sound dying at once, the brothers turned sharply, their eyes blazing. The girl's hand shook, but she forced her words out. "He did not shame me. He saved me," she said, her voice steadying. "He suffered because he stood for my honor." The hall fell silent. Gasps spread through the crowd, whispers twisting like smoke. The human lifted his head slowly, his eyes locking with hers, and in that gaze, the silent promise between them burned brighter than ever. The brothers' faces hardened, their pride wounded, their anger rising. The truth had been spoken, but truth was not always enough to end blood. The storm had broken, but the war of honor had only just begun. The hall was frozen in silence after the girl's words. Her voice still echoed against the stone walls. Trembling but unbreakable, the crowd stared at her in disbelief. Some with widened eyes, some with anger, some with confusion. It was rare, almost unthinkable, for someone to stand against the words of the warrior brothers. Yet here she was, their own sister, declaring that the human had acted with honor, not shame. The eldest brother's face darkened, his jaw tight, his glowing eyes filled with storm. He stepped forward slowly, every movement heavy with power. "Do you know what you are saying?" His voice thundered. "To defend him is to challenge us." The girl trembled, her silver eyes shining, but she did not look away. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, stronger. "Yes." "I know." The crowd erupted, voices clashing like waves. Some shouted for her silence, some demanded the human's death. Others murmured about truth, about courage. The human remained on his knees, his chains cutting into his skin. He watched her, his face bloodied and bruised. Yet his eyes carried something like pride. He had expected nothing, yet she had chosen to speak, and that choice changed everything. One of the younger brothers slammed his fist against the stone floor, the sound shaking the hall. "You defend him?" he shouted, his voice burning with disbelief. "You dishonor us with this weakness." The girl's hands shook, but her voice rose again. "It is not weakness to tell the truth," she said. He stood when no one else would. Her words carried across the hall, trembling yet sharp, cutting through the noise of the crowd. The brothers turned their eyes to the human. As if searching for lies on his broken face, the eldest brother stepped closer, lowering his head so their eyes met. "Why?" he demanded. "Why would you suffer for her, human? She is not your kind." The human's voice was rough, his throat dry, but his words came steady. "Because she deserved better than silence," he said. "I know what it feels like to be left alone, to be mocked, to be treated as less, and I could not watch it happen again." Gasps rippled through the hall, the crowd whispering, their voices tangled with doubt. The brother's eyes narrowed, because his words carried no fear, no selfishness, and for warriors who respected strength, even words could carry weight when spoken with such calm. Yet pride is a heavy chain, and the brothers would not release it so easily. The eldest brother raised his hand, silencing the hall. "Words are wind," he declared. "Truth must be tested." He gestured toward the center of the hall, where the torches flared brighter. "If he claims honor, let him prove it." The crowd roared again, their hunger for spectacle reignited. Some shouted for blood, others for trial, but all leaned forward with greedy eyes. The girl's heart clenched, fear surging through her veins. She stepped forward, her voice breaking. "No, he is wounded. He cannot." But her eldest brother's glare silenced her. "This is our way," he said coldly. "Even you cannot change it." The guards unlocked the human's chains, pulling him roughly to his feet. His legs trembled, his body weak, but he stood. He wiped blood from his face with the back of his hand, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. "What trial?" he asked quietly. Though his voice carried across the hall, the eldest brother pointed to the circle carved into the stone floor, glowing faintly with ancient symbols. "A trial of spirit," he said. "You will face one of us, not to kill, but to endure." The human nodded once. Without hesitation, he knew this was not about winning. This was about standing, just as he had in the market. The guards shoved him toward the circle, the crowd roaring louder. The girl's eyes filled with tears, her heart caught between terror and hope. She wanted to run to him, to shield him, but her feet were heavy, chained by fear and duty. The chosen brother stepped forward, tall and broad, his armor gleaming, his fists like iron. The crowd fell silent, waiting, hungry. The human faced him, his body trembling but his eyes unbroken. The girl whispered a silent prayer, her voice lost in the roar of the fire torches. The trial began. The alien warrior struck first, his blow heavy like thunder. The human staggered. Blood sprang from his mouth, but he did not fall. The crowd gasped, then cheered, their voices shaking the hall. The warrior struck again, harder, faster, but still the human rose every time his body fell. His will dragged it back up. Every time pain tried to silence him, his spirit refused. The girl clutched her chest, her breath sharp. She had never seen anyone fight like this. Not with strength, but with a heart that refused to break. The brothers watched too, their anger shifting into something colder, something thoughtful. This human was not strong in body, but his spirit, his fire was something even they could not deny. Minutes stretched into eternity, each blow heavier, each fall harder, but still the human rose, his blood staining the stone, his breath ragged but steady. And when the trial ended, when the warrior stepped back, the human stood swaying, but unbroken. The hall was silent, the crowd stunned. Even the fire seemed to pause, waiting. The eldest brother's eyes narrowed, his lips pressed tight. This was no weak creature, no cowardly human. This was someone who had chosen suffering for honor, and endured it with unshaken will. The girl's tears fell silently, but her lips curved into the smallest smile. He had kept his promise, his silent promise to stand. No matter the cost, the trial was over. But the question remained, would the brothers accept what they had seen, or would pride blind them still? The hall held its breath, waiting for the judgment that could shape all their fates. The hall was silent, the air thick like a storm waiting to break. The human stood in the circle, his body swaying, his skin bruised and bleeding, but his back still straight. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on him, not because of his strength, but because of his refusal to fall. He had endured blow after blow with nothing but stubborn will holding him up. The chosen brother stepped back, his chest rising with heavy breaths. His fist red with the human's blood, but his eyes, once filled with contempt, now carried something different. A reluctant respect, the crowd murmured in disbelief, whispering about the impossible. A human, a fragile outsider, had stood through the trial of spirit. It had been meant to break him. Yet he still lived, still breathed, still glared back with unbroken eyes. The eldest brother raised his hand and silence fell again. He looked at the human long and hard, his face unreadable. "You have endured," he said, his voice echoing across the stone walls. "But endurance is not proof of honor." The crowd stirred, waiting for his judgment. The girl's heart pounded, her silver eyes wide with fear and hope. She stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Please, enough, you saw it, you saw what he is." Her eldest brother turned to her, his glare sharp. "Silence, sister," he commanded. But she did not lower her head this time. Her fear had burned away, replaced by fire. "No," she said, her voice shaking yet strong. "I will not stay silent." Gasps spread across the hall, whispers rising like a storm. The girl took another step forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "This human did what none of you would do," she said. "He stood when I was mocked. He took pain that belonged to me. He bled because he would not watch me suffer." The hall trembled with her words, the truth cutting through the lies like a blade. The bullies from the market shrank back, their faces pale, their whispers of falsehood now turned against them. The human raised his head slowly, his gaze meeting hers. For the first time since his capture, a faint flicker of warmth passed through his tired eyes. Her words were no longer hidden, no longer choked by fear. She had chosen truth, even against her own blood. The eldest brother's face darkened. His pride warring with the weight of her words, he turned his gaze back to the human. "You claim honor," he said, his voice low. "But honor is not only to protect, it is to stand as one of us." He raised his hand, pointing at the human. "If you are truly what she says, then prove it again. Not with words, not with endurance alone, but with spirit in battle." The crowd roared, their hunger renewed. The girl's heart sank. "No," she whispered. "He is wounded. He cannot fight again." But her words were swallowed by the cheers. The demands for blood, the human broken and bruised, lifted his chin, his breath ragged but steady. "If that is your way," he said quietly, "then I will face it." The brothers exchanged glances, their eyes filled with doubt, with curiosity. They had expected him to beg, to collapse, to yield, but he stood ready, even when his body screamed for rest. The eldest brother nodded once, slowly. "Then you will face me," he declared, his voice thunder rolling through the hall. The crowd gasped, shocked. The eldest never fought outsiders, never lowered himself to face the weak. But this was no ordinary trial anymore. This had become something larger. The girl's knees weakened, her heart racing. If her eldest brother struck, the human would die. Yet the human's eyes did not waver. The two stepped into the circle, torches blazing higher as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The hall held its breath, silence heavier than stone. The human's fist clenched, his chest heaving. The eldest brother moved with calm strength. His steps steady, his eyes sharp as blades. The fight began. The eldest struck with speed that shook the air. The human blocked clumsily, the force sending him staggering, but he did not fall. Another strike came, faster, harder. The human's arm cracked with pain, yet he stood, his feet digging into the stone. Every blow pushed him closer to breaking. But every time he rose, the hall trembled with disbelief. The crowd grew silent again, their cheers fading into awe. What they saw was not victory, not power, but something far greater. A fragile body holding against the storm, a spirit refusing to die. The girl pressed her hand to her chest, her silver eyes wet with tears. He was not fighting to win, he was fighting to stand. To prove her words true, minutes stretched. Every heartbeat a battle, the eldest brother finally stopped. His chest rising, his fist frozen in midair. He stared at the human who swayed on his feet, blood running down his face, but his eyes still glowed with that same fire. The brother lowered his fist slowly, his lips pressing tight. "This human," he said, his voice carrying through the silence, "does not lie." The hall erupted into murmurs. Disbelief mixed with awe. The bullies who had accused him shrank away, their lies now crushed. The girl let out a shaky breath, her shoulders trembling. Her brother had not yet said the word, but she could feel it, respect. The eldest turned to his siblings, his eyes heavy with conflict. Pride still burned in him, but even pride could not deny truth forever. "He stood for her, he suffered for her, and he endured against me," he said slowly. "His honor is real." The girl's tears finally fell, but this time they were not of fear. They were of relief, of gratitude, of pride. The human closed his eyes briefly, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. But before he collapsed, he saw her face, her silver eyes shining with something new. Respect, trust, maybe even hope. The trial of truth had ended, the human had suffered, endured and proved himself. And for the first time, the brothers could no longer call him weak. The honor they had doubted now stood before them, unshaken, unbroken, undeniable. The hall still shook with whispers after the eldest brother's words. No one had expected him to acknowledge the human's honor, but he had, even if the word respect had not yet left his lips. The crowd was restless, caught between disbelief and awe, their voices rising and falling like waves against stone. The human swayed on his feet, his body screaming for rest, his vision blurred with blood and pain, yet he refused to fall, his spirit holding him upright even when his flesh could not. The girl moved forward quickly, reaching to steady him, her silver eyes shining with worry. But before her hand could touch him, the eldest brother raised his arm to stop her. "Not yet," he said, his voice sharp. "If he is to be respected, he must prove it in our way." The crowd hushed, eager to hear more. The eldest stepped into the center of the circle, his eyes fixed on the human. "You have endured. You have stood for truth," he said, his voice echoing. "But respect is not given only by endurance. Respect is earned through ritual, through the warrior's path." The human blinked through the haze of pain, his voice rough but steady. "What must I do?" he asked. The eldest brother's lips tightened into something almost like a smile, though it carried no warmth. "You must face the warrior's right," he said. "A duel not of death but of spirit, where strength is tested and honor measured." Gasps spread through the hall. The right was sacred, reserved for warriors of their kind. Never for an outsider, never for a human. The younger brothers exchanged sharp glances, some with doubt, some with hidden approval. The girl's heart raced, fear clawing at her chest. Her brother was offering the human a path to respect, but it was also a path that could destroy him completely. The human drew in a deep breath, his body trembling but his gaze steady. "I will face it," he said simply. The hall erupted with roars, the crowd hungry for the spectacle. To see a human in the warrior's right was beyond imagination. To see if he would fall or endure was a story that would echo through the city for years. The circle was widened, the torches burning brighter, blue flames casting long shadows across the walls. The chosen brother stepped forward to face him. Not the eldest this time, but the second, broad, fierce, his movements sharp like a blade. The human raised his fist slowly, every muscle burning. He knew he could not match the alien in strength. He knew he would not win, but winning was never the goal. The right began with the sound of a deep drum. The second brother lunged, his strike heavy, his power shaking the ground. The human blocked clumsily, the force knocking him to his knees. But he rose again. Blow after blow rained down, his body cracking under the storm. But still he stood. The crowd gasped, some cheering, some stunned into silence. Every time he fell, he forced himself up, his spirit roaring louder than his pain. The girl pressed her hands to her mouth, her tears streaming silently. She had never seen such determination, such stubborn fire in someone so fragile. Her heart ached with every strike. Yet with every rise she felt hope bloom stronger. Her brothers watched too. Their eyes no longer filled with anger alone. Something inside them shifted, something they could not deny. Minutes stretched into eternity, each one heavier than the last. The second brother struck again, but this time he paused, his chest rising, his eyes narrowing, because the human, though broken and bleeding, still glared back at him, still rose even when his legs shook. Even when his body screamed, the crowd fell silent, their hunger replaced by awe. Finally, the eldest brother raised his hand. Stopping the fight, the drum ceased, the torches flickered low, the hall silent again. The human swayed, his knees almost giving way, but he remained standing. The second brother stepped back, his eyes sharp. Then slowly he raised his weapon in salute. The hall gasped, for this was no small gesture. It was a warrior's respect, a recognition of spirit beyond blood or race. One by one, the other brothers followed, each lifting their weapon in solemn salute. The girl's breath caught, her tears falling freely. Her brothers, proud and fierce, had bowed in their way to the human who had suffered for her. It was more than she had ever dreamed, more than she had ever believed possible. The eldest brother spoke again, his voice heavy with meaning. "This human has shown what many of our own forget," he said. "Honor is not in strength of body, but in the strength to rise again, to suffer for others, to endure when no one else will." He turned to the human, his eyes no longer filled with contempt but with something harder to name. "You are no longer only a stranger among us," he said. "You are a warrior," the hall erupted. Not with jeers, but with cries of respect. The sound shook the walls, echoing like thunder. The human closed his eyes, his chest heavy with exhaustion, but in his heart a strange warmth spread. He had not come for glory, not for respect, but for what was right, and yet through pain and blood. He had gained something greater than survival. He had gained the respect of warriors. The girl stepped forward at last, her silver eyes glowing with pride and relief. She reached out, steadying him as his body finally gave way. He leaned against her, his strength gone, but his spirit unbroken. The crowd still roared. The brothers still watched, and in that moment, the human was no longer only a stranger. He was something more, something they would remember, a warrior who had earned their respect. The hall still shook with voices long after the rite ended. The crowd had seen something they never thought possible. A human, weak in body, had endured the warrior's trial and gained the salute of alien brothers. The sound of respect echoed louder than any cheer, carrying through the stone walls and into the hearts of all who watched. The human leaned heavily against the girl, his strength nearly gone, his blood still dripping, but even as his body swayed, his spirit stood tall, unbroken. The girl held him close, her silver eyes shining with tears, not of fear this time, but of pride, of relief, of something deeper. She whispered softly, only for him, "You are not alone anymore." The eldest brother stepped forward, his shadow long under the glow of the torches. He looked down at the human, his face stern, yet his eyes carried a weight that was no longer filled with hate. "You came to this world a stranger," he said, his voice strong, "and you were met with scorn, with lies, with cruelty." He paused, his words heavy. "But you did not bow. You did not yield. You rose again and again." The hall grew quiet, every ear listening. "You are no longer just human to us," the eldest declared. "You are warrior." The younger brothers followed, each giving a nod, a salute, a mark of respect that outsiders never received. Their armor gleamed under the blue flames, their weapons raised not in threat but in honor. The human watched through weary eyes. His breath rough, he did not seek their praise, but he felt the weight of their respect settle on him like a cloak, heavy yet warm. The girl stepped between them, her voice trembling but clear. "He saved my honor," she said. "He bled for me when no one else would." Her silver eyes turned to her brothers, her tone sharp. "And I will never forget it." Her words struck deep, not only in her family but in the crowd as well, because truth, once spoken with courage, spread like fire, impossible to silence. The crowd's whispers shifted, no longer mocking, no longer filled with scorn. They spoke of the human now with awe, with curiosity, with reluctant admiration. Children pointed at him, their eyes wide with wonder. Elders shook their heads, muttering about honor returning to their people. The story was already spreading, carried by every mouth, carried by every witness. The human, exhausted, finally sank to his knees, his body no longer able to bear the weight. The girl caught him quickly, steadying him. Her brothers moved too, not to strike, not to chain, but to lift. Two of them stepped forward, placing their strong arms under him. Raising him with care, the hall gasped again, for the warrior brothers touched no outsiders. Yet here they were, carrying him as one of their own. The eldest spoke once more, his tone heavy with finality. "This human has shown us what we forgot," he said. "That honor is not measured by blood, not by race, but by spirit." He turned to his people, his voice thundering. "Remember this day, for it is the day we saluted a stranger." The hall erupted, not with jeers, but with thunderous applause, with voices crying out. The sound rolled through the city, through the market, through the homes. It spread like a storm, unstoppable, unforgettable. The name of the human would not be whispered in mockery anymore, but spoken in respect. Later, when the hall emptied and the torches dimmed, the human sat quietly with the girl, his body bandaged, his wounds cleaned, his strength slowly returning. The brothers remained nearby, their eyes watchful, their presence no longer threatening but protective. For the first time, the human did not feel like prey. He did not feel like an intruder, he felt accepted. The girl sat beside him, her silver eyes soft, her voice gentle. "You could have walked away," she said. "You could have stayed silent." The human gave a tired smile, his voice rough. "Silence helps no one," he answered. "I could not let them hurt you, not when I knew the pain of being alone." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her heart heavy with gratitude. In his simple words, she heard more than protection. She heard a bond forming, something stronger than fear. The brothers approached then, their leader stepping forward. He placed a hand on the human's shoulder, heavy but steady. "You are not our enemy," he said. "Not anymore," another brother added, his tone rough but respectful. "You have our respect, human, and our protection." The human bowed his head slightly, too weary for long words, but his silence spoke louder than thanks. That night, under the glow of the two moons, the city whispered. They whispered of the day a human bled for an alien girl's honor. They whispered of the day the warrior brothers lifted their weapons not to kill, but to salute, and across the stars such whispers carried weight. Because in a galaxy where fear often ruled, courage could still change hearts. The girl looked at the human one last time before sleep, her silver eyes soft with something unspoken. "You are not just a stranger anymore," she whispered. "You are one of us." The human closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him into rest, but his heart carried her words. A bond that stretched beyond worlds, a bond born in pain, sealed in respect, and destined to echo across the stars. And so the story ended not with death, not with despair, but with honor gained, respect shared, and a bond that no blade could sever. A human had suffered for the alien girl's honor, and in the end her brothers showed him respect. A tale of courage written not in strength, but in spirit. The galaxy would learn is stronger than fear.